Hello again. I just did a video finding your way. I just did it a while ago, and I got a lot of response from it. And really, what I went into with that is approaching the things I think a lot of people get confused with, thinking that in order to read correctly, I need to do this or I need to do that because that's what it's saying at this source or another source. It's a lot of bells and whistles there, and they're really not that important. When you start to read professionally, you see that because you're reading with a lot of other professional readers here and there, and you realize everybody reads differently, and nobody's using this stuff you were studying. Not to that extreme, anyway. At least not to that extreme. So it's a little different than what it's written about, as far as I'm concerned. And you could spend a lot of time and effort looking into things that really you're not going to use, because the important thing about what you're doing, you learn that as you're starting to read, and that's reading the cards. And so we're really splitting a lot of hairs on the way getting there. And some people are concerned about the fact that it seems like I try to simplify things. And but I started teaching in '93, and with the card meanings, I realized there was so many different sources out there, and they were all a little bit different from each other. So what I did is I took 8 books or so, and I just took what each book was saying about a specific card, and I would blend it together and say, well, okay, all these books would be agreeable that this card basically means this, or these 8 books would be agreeable that this card basically means that. And I went to the basics, and I saw that seemed to work out a lot better. It simplified things, and it opened up other doors that I'm not going to go into right now, but it really helped. And so I know that if we look back at the classic people, Manly P. Hall talks about the tarot a little bit. I got his Secret Teachings. And Elvis Levi, Paul Foster Case, Pappas, Waite, Crowley. They all have their way of looking at the cards, and they all see it their own way. So who's right and who's wrong? Because they all work. Each one of these people that have looked in the cards have been able to successfully use them with their way of looking at it. Their theories in place. And a lot of detail went into their studies on things. But I think when you start to read, you see that detail isn't really necessary. There's a strong mindset out there that the tarot, there's some secret out there about it, that there's only one way to really do it correctly. And the tarot it's not a profession that you could look at like, it's an art is really what it is. It's an art. So seeing it's an art, I mean, Picasso and Salvador Dali were both artists, but they both painted different. And everybody has their own unique style with an art. So there's not one particular way to read these cards, is what I'm saying, because it's an art. And that makes it even more beautiful than if there was some system in place, some hardcore system. I mean, if I'm learning how to fly a commercial airline plane, a 747, I can't get creative on the way I land that plane. I can't. I have to do it by the book. If I'm learning to be an electrician, I have to make sure I'm doing things exactly the right way, or I could burn something down or hurt myself. That's different. But when you're talking about an art, anything goes there. And if people like it, it works. It's your style, your unique way of doing it. And if you know other readers, as a professional, you will start to know other readers. You'll start to see that they all read differently. So I wanted to bring out one particular deck and show what I'm trying to say is that all these different systems that are in place from a long time ago, antiquated, structured instruction, are they're fine, but they're not etched in stone in any way. And we have such a strong mindset about the tarot being this system that's hard to grasp, that it's really strong. But our mindset is very strong. I wrote in Genius of the Tarot, Jebelin, who wrote 1700s, he published Le Monde Primitif, and he's one of the first professional tarot readers around. And he claimed that the tarot was Egyptian origin. And he had this extravagant system in place based on that. And then they deciphered the Rosetta Stone. And Egyptologists saw no parallels between what he was saying at all and hieroglyphics to confirm anything he was saying. So that sort of trashed his theory. Once they understood the language of hieroglyphics, they couldn't see any origin at all of Egyptian in the tarts. But the mindset was so strong that a lot of it stuck anyway, of being origin of Egypt. That's a mindset. Today we have many different decks out there. One of them is the Visconti Sciorza. This is U.S. Games. I think it came out in the 70s, I think. And it's a terrible deck to read with. But it's a real interesting deck because it's from the 1400s. 1975 copyright. U.S. Games. And so it's probably the oldest deck we have. There was almost a complete deck when they found it, and it was it's from the 1400s. It was from the Visconti and Sciorza royal families for a wedding gift. This deck. So it's one of the oldest decks we know of, and you can buy this deck. And if you look at the cards, here's one card here. This is the Wheel of Fortune. And if I look at the Wheel of Fortune from the Rider deck, and I look at these together, there's no astrological signs on there. These two cards don't look anything like each other. So as far as the origin goes, as far as something but the original, traditional, the basic tarot cards, as something that's a traditional understanding of some type that we can't, that we need to stay close with This has nothing close to the Tarot Marseille. Is a lot closer, but not as bad as this. This is 1400s. And you can look at some of the other cards here. Here's the Hermit. Now here's the Rider deck Hermit. And here's the Hermit in the Visconti. And you can see that these two cards are, the Hermit doesn't look anything like the Hermit on the Rider deck. He's holding an hourglass instead of a lantern. He doesn't have a monk's cowl on. So it's a whole different card. Here's the Fool. The Fool is just a homeless vagabond here, dressed in rags. His clothes are almost literally falling off of him. He could be somebody who's really out of his mind. He's wearing feathers in his hair. He looks like a total Looney Tune here, where this guy is all dressed in nice garb and he's all happy and moving along. So, totally different card. Here we have the Star. And again, totally different looking card. The High Priestess. Nothing like the Rider deck. And last I have the Temperance card here. She's not an angel. She doesn't have 1 foot in water, 1 foot on land. The only similarities there is just the two urns, pouring water from one urn to another. And that's it. The other thing that's interesting with this deck, compared to decks today, the card is titled Temperance, and it's number 14 of the major arcana. There's no title or number on these cards, on the Visconti Chorza. None of these have a title or a number on them at all. They're just pictures. Just pictures. So when did they come out with numbers and titles? We know in the 1700s they had them, because the Tarot Marseille is numbered and titled. But then we start to go into debates between Manly Hall and Elivis Levi and Paul Foster Case and Arthur Waite and all these others who have their own theories about the meanings of the cards. And to me, it's just splitting hairs. I don't see any purpose in it, because like one of the main things that they talk about is the numbering of the major arcana. And one of the things that's really discussed is the Tree of Life Kabbalah, the 22 paths, and the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. There's 22 major arcana. So Manly P. Hall, he says, just because there's 22 major arcana and 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, doesn't mean that there's any correlation at all. Elivis Levi shows a correlation. He says that there is a correlation. The numbers of the Hebrew alphabet are also, the letters of the Hebrew alphabet are also numbered. So A is number 1, B is number 2, and so on. And these letters have very deep mystical meaning if you want to study the Kabbalah. They're the 22 paths of the Kabbalah and the Tree of Life. So, number 1 of the major arcana, Aleph, the A of the Hebrew alphabet, Aleph, is number 1. At least I would think it is. And it's the number one path. And number 2 would be Beth, B, and that would be the High Priestess, number 2, and so on, all the way through the 22 numbered major arcana. Well, the major arcana is numbered 0 through 21. So one occultist will say that 0 is really number 22 on the Tree of Life path, the 22nd letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Another occultist will say, really the whole thing starts with 0. So 0 is the first path. And the other cards, even though they're numbered, 1, Magician, is really the second path. And the High Priestess is number 2, is really the third path. And they all move over 1 because the 0 is the first path. Somebody else will say, no, that's wrong. 0 is really at the end of the thing. It's the 22nd path. Eliphas Levi said that it was between number 20 and 21 and 22. So that the Fool card was between the World and the Judgment card. 20 and 21. So the Fool is really number 21, and the World is number 22. If you want to study the Kabbalah through the tarot. I say, who cares? I don't know, I've with all respect to it, I've never met any reader who uses any of that in their readings. It doesn't make any difference. So why study it? It just doesn't work. Today it doesn't work. With all respect to these masters, and I consider them that. I've read a lot of their books. To me, they passed the torch on to us, just like I'm passing the torch on to younger people, like a lot of you. And you're going to know way more than I've ever known someday. I don't think it's something that's locked in history in the past that is ageless. I think it evolves over time. And I think we know more today about ways to use the tarot effectively than we did then. I think the cards are better in a lot of ways. I still like the Marseille deck the most, but that doesn't mean I'm an old dog with old tricks. You can't teach new tricks to an old dog. The cards are beautiful today. And the applications that will be used with those cards, I think, are going to change to something more effective. And that's what I write a little bit about that in my books, with the creative thinking techniques and all this. So I really think that it's, I don't think it's something that we need to focus in the past about trying to find the right way or the correct way to read. I think it's something that we need to look into the future with. And I think it's like looking at the old stuff and saying, well, this is the original, this is the traditional understanding of the cards. Well, the traditional understanding probably wouldn't work today. The basic principles of the tarot, I think, are more effective today than they were basic principles before, of yesterday. And these cards, I think, would show that. I mean, if I wanted to have, if I wanted to look at, if I thought origin was important, I would say, okay, well, the original automobile is really key as far as automobiles go. That's what is really where it's at. So I should be driving a Model T if I really want to drive an automobile. Maybe that's a crude analogy, I don't know. Anyway, I just feel that the old stuff is really great to look into, just you might get something here and there to put in your pocket. And it's wonderful. And I think that these were pioneers, just like we're pioneers now, and just like you're going to be pioneers later on. I'm just passing the torch. There's nothing, I don't believe that you want to look into the past so much for answers about how to use the cards. I would say you're better off looking into what's out there now, and realize that, yeah, it's good to look into the old stuff, just because that's it's interesting, and maybe you want to blend a little of that in with your reading. But is it important if you follow one way or another to a T? Is it important that the Kabbalah's major arcana is numbered with 0 starting 1, or 1 starting 1, and 0 being at the end? It's not going to make a difference with your readings, and it's not going to make any. It doesn't make any difference. So I think it's important to keep that in mind. Astrological signs with things like the wheel card. There's no astrological signs in here. That's the origin. Here we have astrological signs. The Taurus, the Lion, and so on. But do we, if you want to use them, they're there. They weren't here in the original wheel. So going back to the original stuff isn't really, I don't know if it's that helpful. It's interesting though, but not key or not crucial. The main thing is you're having fun with this. Remember, your way is what's important, and you're going to learn that as you move along forward. And I think it's important to have a good core in your learning, and then take the rest of your learning like layers. But if you've got a good core on what you're learning about, a good starting point, I think you can make things a lot easier for yourself, and I think a good starting point is important. So, again, my notes. These are valuable notes, so I thought I'd show them. Anyway, I hope you like this. Just some more I wanted to share my thoughts about this, and keep throwing cards. We'll talk soon. Bye.